Hi everyone, this is a screencast on home assessments and you. So we're going to be looking at the importance of an appropriate home, how occupational therapy can help, the person, the environment and the occupation, occupational performance, how can professional bodies guide your practice, and wide aspects of home visiting. So not all homes are equal, so as you know, you'll be going into lots of different areas. Some areas will be more affluent, some will be deprived. And it's about having that awareness about the levels of equality that we've got in our society. Also thinking about access, so some environments will be very accessible, and even probably they may have been made to suit accessibility. Some newer properties or some properties that have been purpose built, and then there'll be others that aren't very accessible, and it's worth considering that when you're out there in the community. So where does occupational therapy fit? So the primary goal of OT is to enable people to participate in activities of everyday life, and that's individual to everybody. What might be meaningful to one person might not necessarily be meaningful to another, and it's important that you find out what is meaningful and important to your client to guide your interventions. The PEO model, so obviously with this you've got your person, your environment and occupation, and in between there you've got occupational performance. If you've got balance in all these three areas, then you have positive impact on occupational performance. If there's an imbalance in any of these areas, then it has a negative impact on occupational performance. So the person, think about the health condition, the disability, and their functional ability. Think about the personal characteristics as well, so the weight, the height, their age. Think about any emotional or behavioural characteristics, thinking about mood and motivation. Think about family or carers and their support network, and include this in the assessment if needed. What professional support have they got? So what other health professionals are involved? Is there a social worker, crisis team, physio, speech therapist, district nurse, community matron? And the most important thing is to not make any assumptions. So don't just assume that every elderly person who's had a fall is incapable of looking after themselves. Don't just assume that every person with a mental health condition will act or behave in a certain way. Just see the person. I think that's what people with disabilities or health conditions want you to see. They don't want you to see the condition, they want you to see the person. Think about the external environment, so what local amenities are there, what transport links are there. Think about the access to the property but also the surrounding area. The gates, is there a clear width, and think about the state of repair. Dropped curves, and that's for your cars, access and for wheelchairs. Think about parking on the street, parking stress and hard standing. The ramp, think about the gradient, so think about upstands and handrails. The path, is it sloped, and the width, but also think about the surface and whether it's uneven or even. The external doors and grab rails, clear width and threshold at the front and rear, and also think about the steps, the number of steps, where they are, and then also the garden. Think about whether it's enclosed to the front or rear, but also think about access to the garden as well. Let's have a little drink there. So if you were an OT, let's say that you've gone out on a home visit and you're visiting these two properties. What might your initial thoughts be? So just pause this for a few minutes and just write down a few thoughts that you'd have if you were visiting these properties. So I'll share with you my thoughts now. If I was going to this one, I'd be thinking, are they in a first floor flat or second floor flat, because that's going to have an impact on access. Also thinking here, you've got a nice even path, no steps there, so you've got level access. Can't really see, but it doesn't look like there's a step there, or there might be because there's a grab rail. There might be a small step there, but there is a grab rail to hold on to, and the doors look quite nice and wide. I'd be thinking as well, if they were living in here in a flat like this, everything would be on one level, so they'd have the bathroom, the kitchen, toilet, everything on one level. So it'd be quite good from an access point of view. But also think about like what are the neighbours like, because obviously that's going to have an impact on them living there. And the overall grounds look quite sort of well kept and looked after. There's a bus there, so you've obviously got good bus links, you know, if they haven't got their own car. And this property here, I'd be thinking, you know, we're obviously going to have stairs in this property because it's an end terrace. Got a step up there and no grab rails. So if they're struggling at all mobility-wise, might have to think about grab rails there. And it does look a little sort of run down as well, so you'd be wondering about the levels of deprivation within this environment. And there doesn't look to be much around. I mean, you can't see the sides of the picture, but we're wondering about access to sort of other amenities. So internal environment, you've got to think about the corridor, think about the size, layout and storage. So if they're walking with a walking frame, let's say, or any other walking aid, thinking about what turning space they've got. Internal doors, think about the width. You've got to think about position of pipes. So if you're going to be putting grab rails or anything up, or any kind of fittings on the wall, you've got to think about what's maybe behind the wall. Got to be plumbers as well as everything else. Think about supporting walls and hoists. So if you are going to be putting anything in like a banister or a grab rail, is it a solid wall? Think about your number of rooms, the layout downstairs. Kitchens, think about the size, the table space and whether the worktops are at a decent height. Staircase, is it curved straight? Is there a landing? Is there already a stair lift in situ? How many banisters have you got? How many rails have you got? That's really important when you're thinking of looking at stair lifts in whether there's a curve, because that'll affect what type of one you look at. Think about the layout and the size. And moving on to the bathroom, think about whether it's the level access shower or have you got a shower over the bath. What's the turning area like? Are there already grab rails there? What position is the toilet in? Would you be able to get equipment on the toilet? Think about the basin and the wash hand basin and where that is and the type of shower. And also the bedrooms, think about the number and the size. So again, if you were to go into somebody's property and you saw the bathroom like this or stairs like this, what would your initial thoughts be? So again, pause this and just write down a few things on a bit of paper and then we'll go through it together. So this one, if I was walking into here, I'd be thinking there's a lot of things sort of lying on the floor, potential trip hazards. It looks like this is broken as well, so you'd be wondering whether they're able to keep on top of the upkeep of things. And this looks quite sort of like it's seen better days as well. The bin's overflowing. I'd just be wondering whether they're actually able to keep on top of things. I'm wondering about their mental well-being, but also potentially trip hazards and things being quite cluttered as well. Be wondering what all this is here. Are they stockpiling medication potentially? Oh, sorry, I've gone on to... so yeah, you'd be wanting just to have a bit of a check out with them and just checking that they're managing. Then we've got the stairs here, so they're quite narrow for a start, which could be a good thing, you know, if they're having to hold on. I'd be checking whether this is a solid wall and whether, you know, if we do need an additional rail, whether we can fit that. This worries me a bit because there's not much turning space and there could potentially be a fall hazard there. And also the colour of the carpet all just seems to merge into one, so if they've got any visual problems, I'd be thinking about putting some tape there just to distinguish the steps a bit more from a visual perceptual point of view. So think also about occupation. So we want to be thinking about the person's activities of daily living, so washing and dressing and personal hygiene, thinking about domestic activities, so shopping, cooking and cleaning, leisure, hobbies, pets and sports, and also always ask the work question. So ask what kind of work they've got, whether that be paid or voluntary or in education. So as a therapist, our aim is to understand the relationship between the person, the occupation and the environment, and find ways of adapting the environment to ensure the best fit. And always remember, just because it worked for one person doesn't mean that it will work for another. So occupational therapy and home visits. So within the home visit, you'd be looking at the assessment of the complex health needs. You'd obviously be including the patient, the service user and the family. Access visit is where they're not with you, so you're just going out as sort of a pre-visit really, just to suss things out. Or you might just do an access visit without a home visit. And you need strong clinical reasoning skills. And then you might look at adapting the environment, where you put in equipment and minor fixings. There's also adaptations. Can either be minor or major, and you can modify the existing environment. So the other thing you've got to think about when you're in people's homes is not medicalisation of the home. So some people may not want these kind of very clinical looking pieces of equipment in the home environment, and just be prepared for them to say that they don't want it. And as long as they understand and have capacity to understand the risks behind not having that piece of equipment, it is their choice. So I would always say, I'll give you the advice, it's up to you what you do with it. And believe me, the language you use and the approach you take has a massive impact. So it just goes back to what I've saying there, it's their choice. Think about your professionalism, and obviously we've got all our professional bodies to help us govern that. We've got COT, HCPC, and professional standards within there. So professionalism, I'll just go over these. Promote and protect the interest of the service user, communicate appropriately, work within the limits of your knowledge and skills, delegate appropriately, be respectful, manage risk, but also think about positive risk taking as well. Report concerns about safety, be open when things go wrong, be honest and trustworthy, and keep records of your work with service users and carers. Values, so be respectful, non-judgmental, maintain dignity, have cultural sensitivity, think about language barriers, mental capacity, anti-aggressive practice, trustworthy, think about the Equality Act. So integrity, so have the courage, I will have the moral courage to make my actions consistent with my knowledge of right and wrong. Think about practicalities of policy, so when you're in different work environments, be aware of what local policies there are, as well as national policy. Think about health and safety, confidentiality, data protection, safeguarding, prevent, which is a terrorism policy, managing expectations and fulfill your commitments. And then summary, so we thought about home, the OT, the PE model, clinical reasoning, professionalism. And there's your reference list. Hope that's been useful.